Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. In my book, Not Just Cute, How Powerful Play Drives Development in Early Childhood, I simplified the definition of play down to two essential elements: agency and joy. Over these next two episodes, I'm going deeper on both, exploring what they really mean, why they matter so much, and what it looks like to protect them in the early childhood classroom. You can find this episode's show notes, which are always full of links, tidbits, and resources at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 84. In this episode, I'll be talking about agency. And to be fair, this is a big topic that I can't possibly cover in an exhaustive way in 30 to 40 minutes. But I'm going to hit on some really interesting pieces that hopefully get you started in thinking about what agency actually means and what it can look like in your program. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that you can find my book along with study guides and summary videos at notjustcute.com/book. It's grounded in research but written to be accessible and practical for the educators and leaders doing this work every day. It's a great resource for book studies and professional development, and I'd love for it to find its way into the hands of the people who need it most. Find links, including how to get bulk copies, at notjustcute.com/book. If you've ever wondered what agency really means for young children, why it matters, and how we can protect it in our early learning environments, this episode is for you. Let's jump in. Much of the work I do focuses on making research more accessible in ECE contexts. I love to dig into the research and try to make it a little bit clearer, more conversational, so that we can actually talk about and apply the really important research that's out there. In my book, I distilled the various definitions of play down to their most essential elements. And when I look across the landscape of research and theory, there are two things that keep rising to the surface again and again: agency and joy. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that that's all there is to play. Play is wonderfully complex. Scholars have spent decades debating exactly how to define it, and there's still no single definition that everyone agrees on. So I don't expect everyone to agree on mine either. But when I look at the most respected definitions, those two elements, agency and joy, show up in some form in nearly all of them. Today's episode is all about agency. Next time, we tackle joy. So let's start with what agency is. It's not really a word that we typically use in our everyday conversations. When I talk about agency, I'm talking about the ability to make choices, to act on those choices, and to feel like those actions have real, meaningful impact. I think of it as a broader umbrella term that overarches things like autonomy, self-efficacy, and intrinsic motivation. It's the sense that you have the power to act and to assert some level of control over what happens around you. Maybe that sounds like a really simple concept, but I think we underestimate how profound and how foundational that feeling of control actually is. In fact, one paper synthesizing the research on agency and healthy development made this bold statement, quote, "The desire for control is an essential component of what it means to be human." I mean, that just really struck me. They use the word essential, not important or nice or helpful, essential. Agency is essential to what it means to be a healthy, developing human being. Children develop their sense of agency or their lack of it early on. The experiences they have in their first years, including the experiences that they have in their first classrooms, shape how they understand their own power in the world. While you can find this in current research, and we're going to get more of that in a moment, this isn't a new idea. This isn't something that we're just now figuring out. The most foundational thinkers in child development have been pointing to agency as essential throughout the past century or more. Let me walk you through just a few of the big ones because I think it's important to understand that we're not introducing something radical or new. We're asking, again, for what theory and research have long said that children need. So let's start with Erikson. If you've studied developmental theory, you've likely encountered Erikson's stages of development. The early childhood years are largely defined by two critical stages: autonomy versus shame and doubt, and initiative versus guilt. Think about those words: autonomy, initiative. Erikson's framework for healthy development in the early years is built largely around the child's growing sense of their own power to act independently and to initiate their own experiences. When children are supported in developing that autonomy and that initiative, they move forward in positive ways. That's Erikson. That's foundational developmental theory. Then there's Piaget, who understood that children are not passive receivers of information. They are active constructors of knowledge. For Piaget, children build their understanding of the world through hands-on exploration, through experiencing it, through language and thought developing together, through the exercise of imagination. None of that happens in a passive, sit still and listen kind of environment. It requires agency, the freedom to touch, to try, to wonder, and to construct. Vygotsky, or someone I often refer to as my buddy Lev, he emphasized language and connection. He understood that children develop through the back and forth conversation, through planning and making choices, through scaffolded autonomy, that there's this just right level of support that we can offer without taking over. Vygotsky was centering the child's own direction and agency in all of this. And of course, there's Maria Montessori, who supported the child's capacity for independence and self-motivated choice. Her famous phrase, "help me do it myself," captures that supported independence really perfectly. The goal is not a child who can simply follow instructions. It's a child who can direct their own learning. It's a child who is deeply engaged, an active participant in their own development. So there's Erikson, Piaget, Vygotsky, Montessori. These aren't fringe thinkers. These are the foundations of the field of child development. And all of them, in their own way, are pointing to the same thing. Children need agency to learn and grow. Those same needs are also supported by current research. As just one example, a 2023 article by researchers at the University of Cambridge, which will be linked in the show notes, states that playful learning works because it harnesses the way the brain learns naturally. And in explaining this powerful natural learning process, they go on to focus the rest of the paper on agency. They contend that play, agency, and learning are all part of a multifactorial reinforcing system. Play and agency reinforce each other, and agency and learning reinforce each other. Agency, as that connective piece between play and learning, introduces powerful learning mechanisms that enhance both the learning and the play. They describe this with the imagery of a car. The car is built through that system of play and learning. But a car needs an engine to move it forward, and it needs steering to give it direction. Agency introduces the engine of motivation and the steering through self-regulation. The engine of motivation moves the learning forward. It draws from intrinsic motivation, curiosity, and genuine interest. Incidentally, another paper that I'll link discusses the specific power of mastery motivation, this motivating desire to interact with competence. It's a really powerful type of motivation, and it is reinforced by play. Remove the agency, and you've largely gutted this engine of motivation, the power to move forward. The car's steering or the direction of self regulation comes from a child knowing that they can be what the authors called a causal force. They're able to take action and have an impact. It's in their decision making, their problem solving, and their innovating. These are big tasks with lots of power, but they're easily found in developmentally appropriate doses through play. These opportunities allow children to direct their learning, not just because it feels powerful, but because it is powerful. It's powerful to learn actively and to be guided by your own meaningful questions. So, by introducing agency, by making sure that it is a consistent component of both play and learning, we introduce that self regulation, that self direction that helps to steer this powerful car. If a child is constantly in a passive state, robotically following prescribed steps, or simply being entertained, they don't connect to the driving force of motivation or the steering force of self regulation. These learning mechanisms are connected to exercising agency, and agency is easily connected to both learning and play. The Cambridge authors wrote, quote, "It is hard to imagine genuine play without agency," end of quote. But that doesn't mean that we don't try from time to time, right? Mistaking entertainment, distraction, or prescription for play. Without agency, however, it isn't genuine play and it loses some of those powerful elements. In a study published in the Early Childhood Education Journal in 2025, researchers found a statistically significant difference in the amount of time children spent playing with toys that they had a role in choosing compared with similar toys that they were simply presented with and told to play. They played longer with those toys that they were able to use after exercising their agency. Without agency, the appearance of play simply lacks power. In addition to learning, research from Dr. Peter Gray connects the loss of agency to real mental health consequences for children, which I go deeper into in the book. Removing developmentally appropriate agency from the lives and play of children seems to be like yanking on a very important thread in a tapestry. Suddenly, everything else goes snagged and out of place. So, if agency is this foundational, if it's been central to developmental theory for over 100 years, and the current research keeps confirming its role in learning and development, then why do we need to have this conversation? It's because something is getting in the way, and I want to give it a name: pervasive passivity. I use that term because I think it describes what's happening in our culture, particularly for young children. There is a creeping, pervasive influence in modern life that consistently moves children from an active to a passive position. And it's happening in many ways that you likely observe on a regular basis. The first is digital media. How often have you seen a young child lulled into a state of inaction by the glow of a screen? Now, not all content is created equal, of course, but what we're seeing with increasing frequency is young children spending extended time in front of various screens, scrolling through content that has been predetermined by an algorithm. The child thinks they're making choices, but the next video was already queued up before they even asked for it. The screen, the algorithm, or the adult who handed it to them is often in control, and the child is simply passive and pacified. The second is overscheduling. When a child's day is entirely structured by adults, moving from one organized activity to the next, being directed and controlled at each stop, being expected to be still, to be quiet, to be compliant, that child is functioning as a passive passenger in their own life. And third, and this is really important because it's the one educators have the most direct influence over, is our early childhood learning environments. Too many programs still expect children to sit still, be quiet, and passively receive information. And that's just not how young children are wired to learn. It's not developmentally appropriate, and the research is really clear on this. In fact, here's one striking data point from this area of research. Studies have shown that modern preschool and pre-K teachers have increasingly shifted towards direct instruction, talking at passive children rather than talking with actively engaged ones. And here's the irony. This shift towards more direct or efficient teaching has actually produced less learning. It's inefficient, particularly when we want to produce the kind of deep, lasting learning that we want for our young children. So let's talk a little bit about what this can actually look like in practice. Because I think sometimes when we talk about agency, we can make it sound like an abstract ideal, something that we believe in, but we aren't quite sure how to do it. So I want to get practical with you for a few minutes. First, agency is about choice, but it is also more than that. It's more than just asking if they want the red cup or the blue cup at snack time. It's creating a developmentally appropriate environment that supports and creates physical and emotional safety for them to make meaningful choices. A room with a variety of activities to choose from and choices to be made within those activities. There's ownership and there's interaction between the child and the adults, between the child and the materials, between the child and the environment. Real agency is when a child decides what they want to make and then figures out how to make it. It's when they choose who they want to play with and what story or world they'll create together. And when they encounter a problem, the blocks keep falling over, or the friends disagree, or the paint isn't doing what they wanted, they get the opportunity to work through it rather than being immediately rescued or redirected. So, how do we create that in our classrooms? Let me give you just a few concrete things to think about. But before I do, let me offer the caveat that I don't know your children like you do. That means I can't say for certain what would be the very best way to support their agency. But hopefully, these ideas will get you started in recognizing how to best respond to where they are. Maybe these are things that you can start talking about in your teams. So, first, language matters. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is moving from telling children what to do to wondering out loud with them. I wonder is a powerful phrase in an early childhood classroom. I wonder what would happen if. I wonder what we could do about. I wonder how you could both. It doesn't give the answer, it doesn't take over, it just invites curiosity and also ownership. It opens a door and then steps out of the way and lets the children walk through it. Supporting agency means inviting children to think out loud and to problem solve together. Second, think about your environment. What message does it send? The physical space itself should communicate to the child, you belong here, you are capable, and you have power. A well-designed early childhood classroom supports agency structurally. The materials are accessible. Children can get what they need without asking permission for every little thing. Take an inventory and ask yourself if there's something the children could do or should be able to do by themselves that you might be interrupting or making inaccessible, or perhaps your environment is getting in the way of and could be changed. In an environment that promotes agency, areas are set up in ways that invite independence as well as exploration and discovery. Centers aren't just activities to complete, they are open-ended invitations to wonder and create. And the third one kind of builds off of that. I want you to think about where you could introduce more open-ended opportunities. Could you provide more choices within activities, not just the choices between activities? Are there genuine ways for children to make those activities their own, to do it differently than the person next to them? Can they do it differently today than they did it yesterday? Can they decide how to approach it, what kind of materials to use or how to use the materials? Can they make choices about how to explore or represent what they're learning? Or are you offering just one right way to do it and everyone is marching towards it in unison? So, back to that paper written by the Cambridge researchers. They pointed out that playful learning isn't about simply providing activities, it's about creating an opportunity for the child to actively engage. It's the agency, the self directed motivation that activates the learning, not the picture perfect activity. Now, number 4 is a little bit different, and maybe it'll catch you off guard. When we're talking about agency, I also want you to think about movement. Movement is one of the most basic, primal forms of agency. The ability to decide to stand up, to move your body, to go from here to there, to move around the room. Young children are not designed to sit still for extended periods. When we require that of them, we are, in a very literal and physical sense, removing their agency. So think about how much of the day children in your program have the freedom to move, not just at scheduled outdoor times and not just in unison, but throughout the day as an active agent. And lastly, I want you to ask yourself, where and when are the children invited to engage in the process of discovery, in discussion, in problem solving, or in the process of creation? And then ask yourself where you could expand or build on those opportunities. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of this is easy. You have a schedule, you have a group of children with a wide range of needs and personalities. This isn't about a perfectly prescribed response. It's about being responsive and reflective and intentional about where there are spaces within your structure that you can open up real choices, real initiative, real ownership, because every one of those moments is an investment in a child's developing sense of agency. As we wrap up today, I want to share something I find both fascinating and a little bit maddening, if I'm being honest. And it has to do with a topic that I am admittedly not at all an expert in, and that's artificial intelligence. Dr. Alison Gopnik is a brilliant developmental scientist whose work focuses on how young children learn. And in recent years, she's been approached by AI developers who want to understand the human learning process more deeply. That's because the human child, as it turns out, is still a more sophisticated learning model than the most advanced AI systems we've built. So think about that for a moment. AI developers wish they worked with a system as complex and sophisticated as young children. In writing about this work for the Wall Street Journal, Dr. Gopnik pointed out something really important. Part of what makes human learning distinct from AI is that children learn socially from human interaction, while AIs learn from specific controlled human supervision. Additionally, she pointed out that children are driven by curiosity, active exploration, and experimentation, while AI systems are stuck inside the mainframe, so to speak, passively absorbing data and following directions. She wrote back in 2019 that she was collaborating with computer scientists to better understand how to make AIs that are more like young children, in that they could be curious, active learners. Now, whenever I talk about this, I have to point something out. Isn't it wild that in this advanced technological age, we have systems working to help computers be more like children, while at the same time, we still have systems that expect children to act like computers? If we put more energy into giving artificial systems ideal learning environments than we put into giving real children those same conditions, we will have made a serious mistake in our priorities. But I also find the language around AI interesting to look at through the lens of the early childhood classroom, because in recent years, there's been a lot of talk about and progress toward what's called agentic AI. So that's AI with more agency. And if you hold that language about that agentic AI, if you hold that up next to what we know about children and agency, something really illuminating happens. So, traditional AI is essentially a passive tool. It follows instructions, generates what it's asked for, responds when prompted. It doesn't initiate, it doesn't explore, it doesn't work towards a goal on its own. It just does what it's told. AI that's been given agency, by contrast, is described as proactive and autonomous. It can act on information, work toward a goal, engage in complex problem solving. It can make plans and it can take action. It learns from interaction rather than requiring constant supervision and control. It's responsive to different contexts. Now, I want to be really clear. I am not making a statement about AI. There are other experts that can do that. But what I am saying is this. If you read those two descriptions and think about them as learning environments for children rather than computers, the answer is obvious. We clearly want the one with more agency for our children, the proactive one, the curious one, the one that can work toward a goal, solve problems, and learn from interaction rather than passive absorption and hollow task completion. That's what we're building when we protect agency in early childhood. We're not just being nice, we're not just following a philosophical preference. We're building the very capacities that even the most sophisticated technology in the world is still trying to replicate. So let's work on supporting real agency for real children first. Let the computer models keep trying to catch up. We need agentic children more than we need agentic AI. In the next episode, we'll talk about the second element of play, and it's something AI will never be able to replicate: joy. Not as a bonus or a reward, but as a critical component of developmental design. I hope you'll join me. Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 84. There, you'll find links to the research I cited, some of the questions I pointed out, as well as other tidbits I know you'll love. You can also hit up the show notes for a link to the book study guide and resources so that you can go deeper in your own study or with your team. And like I said, if agency got you thinking, just wait. In the next episode, we're talking about joy. So stay tuned for episode 85. You won't want to miss it. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. You can also stay tuned for social media updates on Instagram by following me at Amanda_NotJustCute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.